The first time the HOA president threatened to foreclose on my family's farm, I almost laughed, because she was standing on dirt that my great-granddad paid for before her parents even knew what a community standard was, and she had the nerve to say my mailbox was emotionally aggressive. Then she screamed, like full volume, horror movie screamed, when she realized the land she'd been terrorizing me on. Yeah, it was mine. I hadn't been back in 20 years, not really. Chicago had a way of swallowing you whole. Deadlines, gray mornings, software releases, and that constant low-grade pressure that makes you feel like you're always behind even when you're sprinting. When Grandpa William passed, I told myself I'd go soon. Soon turned into 6 months. Grief has that funny trick where it turns time into mush, days blur, and the hard stuff gets shoved into corners until it starts leaking out in weird places, like at 2 a.m. when you're staring at a ceiling wondering why you feel guilty for being alive. So I quit, packed up my apartment, drove 8 hours straight on caffeine and old memories, and when my truck's tires hit that long dirt driveway, the gravel crunching under me like a familiar song, I thought I'd find the same world I left. The farmhouse was there, white-clabbered, sun-bleached into that bone-old color, porch sagging on the north side like it had been sighing for a century. The oak tree was there too, the one that used to hold a tire swing for every kid who ever visited, except now, beyond it, the horizon wasn't cornfields anymore. It was beige. Rows and rows of identical houses, manicured lawns like somebody vacuumed the grass, little HOA signs on every corner in tasteful forest green. The kind of green that screams, "We're friendly," while quietly threatening to tow your car. I just stood there, sweating in the August heat, smelling dirt and weeds and the faint sweetness of whatever Grandpa used to plant out back, and hearing, way off in the distance, the hum of a riding mower like suburban white noise. Inside, the house was hollow in that way only a recently lived-in place can be, dust motes floating in a shaft of light, the air still holding the ghost of someone's routine. I carried boxes in, one by one, until I found the kitchen table. It was buried. Papers everywhere. Deeds, survey maps, letters, folders with labels that looked like they'd been written by a man who didn't panic. He prepared. One folder said community development agreements. I opened it and immediately felt my brain short-circuit. The language wasn't English, it was law. The kind where a single sentence can ruin your next decade. I told myself I'd deal with it tomorrow. That's when the white BMW slid into my driveway like a shark smelling blood. A woman got out with a stride that didn't just say she was in charge, it said she was owed obedience. Blonde bob cut like it was measured with a ruler, navy blazer in 95-degree heat, clipboard in her hand like a weapon. Her heels clicked on my dirt driveway, as if my property itself offended her. "Excuse me," she called, not asking, announcing. "This property is in violation of multiple community standards." I set down my suitcase, stared at her like she'd walked out of a parody. "Community standards? This is my family's farm." She smiled, sharp, tidy professional. "Karen Whitman, president of the Maplewood Estates Homeowners Association. And this property falls under our jurisdiction." She looked past me at the farmhouse the way people look at a raccoon in a trash can. Peeling paint, overgrown landscaping, inappropriate agricultural equipment visible from the street. I turned and followed her gaze. There was an old tractor behind the barn, rusting peacefully, hurting no one. The paint was weathered, sure, but it had character, it had history. It wasn't a Pinterest board. It was real. My grandfather never mentioned an HOA. I said, keeping my voice level because my instincts were already screaming, "Don't give her the satisfaction." "Oh, he did," she said, flipping her clipboard with theatrical precision. "He agreed to oversight in 2018. We have signed documentation. Noncompliance can result in daily fines, liens against the property, and ultimately foreclosure proceedings." Foreclosure. On a farmhouse my family built before sliced bread was cool. "I'll need to review whatever you're talking about," I said. "Of course," she replied, like she was granting me a gift. "You have 72 hours to bring the property into compliance. Fines begin at $200 per day." She handed me a fat packet like she just served me my own eviction, then walked back to her BMW and drove off, leaving dust and arrogance hanging in the air. That night, I sat at the kitchen table under a dim light, surrounded by Grandpa's paperwork, trying to untangle how a 100-year-old farm had somehow gotten absorbed by a planned community with rules about laundry lines. My eyes burned. My brain felt stuffed with cotton. Around 9, my phone rang. "Mr. Smith," a woman said. "Margaret Foster, your grandfather's attorney." He instructed me to contact you once you arrived. I almost laughed, except nothing was funny. A lady named Karen Whitman showed up today threatening fines and foreclosure. What did my grandfather sign? There was a pause, long, careful. Your grandfather was strategic, Margaret said. He believed that when you were ready, you'd remember what matters most about that land. Look through his papers. Don't let anyone intimidate you. You have more power here than you realize. Then the line went dead, like she'd said too much and knew it. I fell asleep right there at the table, my cheek pressed into a survey map, dreaming of Grandpa's voice saying something about lines, about stakes, about never letting someone else redraw your world, just because they show up with confidence and a clipboard. The next morning, I woke to car doors slamming. Karen was back, with two men in polo shirts carrying cameras and measuring tools, moving across my property like they were documenting a crime scene. They photographed cracks in the driveway, counted weeds, measured grass like the lawn had personally insulted them. Karen handed me a fresh violation notice. Daily fines begin immediately, she said. $200 for exterior paint, $100 for landscaping, $50 for agricultural equipment visibility. I did the math and felt my stomach drop, $350 a day. Over $10,000 a month to exist on my own land. Then I noticed the attached map. The HOA boundary lines weren't just brushing my property. They swallowed it, claimed jurisdiction over most of what I'd always thought was ours. This can't be right, I said. Karen's smile widened, smug and bright. Actually, honey, you might want to check your facts. Welcome to the neighborhood. Learn to play by our rules. And that's when it stopped being annoying and became personal. The first week felt like living under surveillance. Every morning at 7:30, the same ritual, Karen's heels, the clipboard, the little team of compliance minions. New citations kept appearing like they were being invented in real time. $50 for non-conforming vegetation. $100 for inappropriate storage, because a shovel was leaning the wrong way. $75 for laundry hanging behind the house. Apparently clotheslines violated aesthetic standards, because God forbid anyone dry a t-shirt without corporate involvement. The neighbors watched from behind curtains. Some looked sorry. Some looked relieved it wasn't them. An older woman next door, Susan, caught my eye once and gave me a tiny nod like, I see you. I've survived her too. When Karen was busy photographing my mailbox, 3 inches too close to the property line, allegedly, Susan leaned in and whispered, she's done this to all of us. The Andersons repainted their whole house because she decided yellow was too bright. $12,000. How is this legal? I whispered back. Susan let out a laugh that wasn't amused, it was tired. Legal's got nothing to do with it when you're dealing with someone who thinks paperwork makes them God. Be careful. She's gotten families pushed out. That night, I went into the basement, partly because I needed tools, partly because I needed air that didn't taste like Karen's perfume and threats. The basement smelled like my childhood, old wood, machine oil time. In a box labeled property records, I found survey maps going back to the 1920s, tax bills, old correspondence. And that's when the numbers punched me in the face. The current property tax records showed I was paying taxes on far more land than just the farmhouse yard. I was paying taxes on most of what Maplewood Estates sat on. I flipped through Grandpa's journal, his tight, engineer handwriting, and found an entry from 2018. The boy will understand when he's ready. Sometimes the best way to teach someone about power is to let them think they have it. That old memory hit me at 12, sitting on that same workbench, asking Grandpa why he let strangers put up a Maplewood sign near the road. He'd rocked back in his chair and said, sometimes you let people show you who they really are, Tommy, then you decide what kind of neighbors you want them to be. I had forgotten. Completely. Like an idiot. Then Karen texted me, because of course she did. Tomorrow's inspection will include a structural engineer to review your barn for general safety compliance. Demolition may proceed if necessary. My barn. Grandpa's barn. A century of storms and repairs and memories, reduced to a line item on her tyranny spreadsheet. And suddenly, something in me went quiet. Not calm exactly. More like a switch flipped. I drove straight into town to Margaret Foster's office and dropped the violation notices, the HOA map, and my tax records on her conference table, like I was dumping out a bag of snakes. She studied everything with that cold focus lawyers get when they smell a case. Your grandfather knew, she said finally. He prepared. There are legal requirements for HOAs, proper conveyance, subdivision processes, recorded transfers. If what I'm seeing here is accurate, the community built improvements on land that was never legally transferred. I stared at her. Are you telling me the community center, the playground, all of it? Margaret's smile was small and sharp. Give me a little time to confirm. But yes, you may own more than you think. Document everything Karen says and does. I left that office feeling like I'd just been handed a loaded weapon with no safety manual. That's when the twist showed up, wearing an old baseball cap and carrying 2 glasses of sweet tea. Robert Johnson, Grandpa's oldest friend, was sitting on his porch like he'd been waiting for this moment since the Bush administration. When I told him what was happening, he didn't look surprised. He looked vindicated. Tommy, he said, voice dry as leaves, that woman thinks she owns land your family's had since Calvin Coolidge was president. Your granddad let him build their little kingdom for one reason. He wanted to see what kind of neighbors they'd be. You're saying he just let a whole development get built on our land? Robert nodded slowly. Developer was supposed to build on Peterson land south of you. Deal fell apart. Permits got issued anyway. Paperwork got sloppy. And your granddad watched it all. Kept every record. Every threat. Every abuse. Then he handed me a key. This opens the strong box behind the bookshelf in your granddad's bedroom. He said when you were ready to stop being a victim and start being a smith, you'd know what to do. That night, I moved Grandpa's heavy oak bookshelf and found the safe, old, solid, installed like it expected secrets. The key turned smooth. Inside was the whole story, neatly stacked like evidence. The original 1924 deed. Surveys. Tax records proving continuous ownership. Copies of building permits issued without proper verification. Legal opinions from multiple firms, basically spelling out, if someone builds on your land without permission, those improvements belong to you. At the bottom was a letter addressed to me, in Grandpa's handwriting. He wrote that he could have stopped the development with one call. Could have had houses torn down. But he waited to see who these people were. To see if they'd respect the land and each other. And Karen Whitman failed that test every day. The choice is yours, Grandpa wrote. Use power wisely. Power shows character. I sat on that floor until midnight, the air thick with dust and truth, realizing Karen's authority was a costume. Mine was recorded at the courthouse. By morning, my plan was simple: give her one chance to act like a human being. I pulled up to her McMansion, perfect shrubs, perfect grass, perfect everything, and knocked with my folder of documents tucked under my arm like a bomb. Karen opened the door in a navy blazer and pearls, already annoyed. If this is about the violation notices. It's not, I said. We need to talk about the legal status of your association. She laughed, loud and sharp. I've been president 8 years. I know our legal standing. Then you won't mind verifying this, I said, and showed her the 1924 survey. This entire development sits on land that was never legally conveyed out of my family's ownership. Her smile twitched. That's ridiculous. So I walked her, on foot, through her precious Maplewood like a guided tour of her own illusion. Community center, my land. Playground, my land. Tennis courts, entrance gates, parking lots, my land. I showed her tax records proving it. Her face drained color by the time we reached the HOA office. And that's when she switched from dismissive to bargaining, like a person watching their throne crack. Okay, she said, voice tight. What do you want? Money? Back rent? I want the harassment to stop, I said. I want the fines refunded. I want this community to be a community, not your little kingdom. And I want lease terms that let families stay, because most of them bought in good faith. Her eyes flashed. Lease terms? That's extortion. It's reality, I said. The alternative is eviction proceedings for every structure built on my property. Karen puffed up. We don't negotiate with extortionists. I'll see you in court. Great, I said, and started to leave. That should have been the end. But Karen couldn't help herself. She texted me later, threatening barn demolition again, like she was addicted to crossing lines. And that's when I stopped trying to be nice. Margaret had eviction notices drafted within hours, not for homeowners' houses, because I wasn't trying to punish families, but for HOA-controlled structures and common facilities. The community center, the HOA office, the playground, 30 days. And alongside that, lease agreements. $50 a month per household instead of their $400 HOA fee. Democratic governance, term limits, transparency. The opposite of Karen's little reign. When the notices got served, my phone exploded. Karen called screaming like a kettle on the edge of madness, threatening arrests, lawsuits, the whole performance. That night, She held an emergency meeting in the community center, on my land, like irony was a language she didn't speak. I walked in with a projector and a calm I didn't feel. Karen went first, whipping the room into a frenzy about scams and outsiders and legalized theft. People glared at me like I'd come to steal their kids' bicycles. Then the chairman, nervous guy with a trembling voice, asked if I wanted to respond. I clicked on the projector and put the 1924 survey up on the wall. The room made a sound like a collective inhale. Then I showed the tax records, the permits, the maps, the overlap, the undeniable paper trail. Somebody asked the question I'd been waiting for, voice shaking. Why didn't your grandfather stop this 20 years ago? And I told them the truth. Because he wanted to see what kind of neighbors you'd be, I said. He didn't want to destroy families. He wanted to see if power would be used with decency. And for years, a lot of you probably just tried to live your lives, but Karen turned this place into a fear factory. Karen tried to interrupt. This is lies. But her voice didn't carry like it used to. The room had shifted. I put the lease terms up, cheaper, fair, democratic, and you could feel people doing the math in their heads, and the moral math too. Not just money but dignity. Sign if you want to stay and keep the amenities, I said. Don't sign, and in 30 days the HOA facilities have to vacate. I'm not trying to wreck your lives. I'm trying to stop one person from wrecking everyone's. I packed up and left while the room erupted into arguments and whispers, and for the first time, something like real community debate. A week later, most households signed. Karen's inner circle tried to resist. Karen herself vanished. 3 days of darkness at her house, newspapers piling up, no movement. Susan called for a wellness check, because even after everything, Susan still had a heart. The police found Karen barricaded in her bedroom with HOA binders stacked like sandbags, spiraling into paranoia. She was taken in for psychiatric help, screaming about property rights and conspiracies. And listen, here's the part one didn't expect. I didn't feel triumphant watching that ambulance. I felt hollow, because power doesn't just corrupt people, it can rot them from the inside until they don't know who they are without it. But karma still did what karma does. The dictator fell, the community breathed. Without her, Maplewood changed fast, block parties, neighbors talking, kids playing, laundry on clotheslines like tiny flags of freedom. The new board was elected openly, meetings became normal instead of theatrical trials, and that $350 a month families got back. It stayed in their lives. Vacations. Savings. Less stress. Months later, Karen showed up at my farmhouse wearing jeans and a sweater, no blazer, no badge, no performance. She apologized quietly like it physically hurt. I lost perspective, she said, staring into her coffee. I thought I was protecting the community, and I was really just protecting my control. I believed she meant it, and that was complicated. The lesson I took from all of it, this thing Grandpa tried to teach me, and I ignored until the universe basically slapped me with a legal binder, is that power doesn't announce itself as evil. It shows up as standards, and order, and for your own good, and if nobody checks it, it grows teeth. And the scariest part? Sometimes the monster isn't born a monster. Sometimes it's just a person who never hears the word no until it's too late. In the end, the community kept their homes, the HOA got rebuilt into something fair, my barn stayed standing, solid, stubborn, laughing at the idea that Karen's clipboard could erase a century of sweat and storms. Justice didn't look like bulldozers and revenge. It looked like accountability and a neighborhood learning, the hard way, what real leadership is supposed to be. And yeah, Karen's scream? That first scream when she realized her empire was built on land she didn't own. That was the sound of borrowed authority finally hitting the ground. So here's the question that still messes with me, and I want you to really sit with it. If you had the legal power to destroy a whole community that wronged you, would you do it, or would you choose the slower, harder path of making them face the truth without burning everyone down? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me where you draw the line between justice and revenge. And if you've ever dealt with someone who hid behind rules to control people, I want to hear your story.